This might be a piece of work, to be honest. So what I could do is add a function called updateMoves. And then I would like to do that. And I would like to switch the type. And then I basically want to do the exact same thing as in setMoves, where I look through every single type of move and then I update them accordingly. And default case, just in case. I believe I have a bool called has moved. Exactly. So what I could do is check if has moved. Then we want to, I guess I could do moves, erase. Oh, there's a popback function. Of course, I should know this, what the fuck. So I think that's all we have to do for the actual pawn. Because when we have moved, we don't want it to be able to move 2 steps at a time. Actually, I could also do it like this, because I only want to update the moves when a piece has moved, so we don't need to do these checks for every single case. So if it hasn't moved yet, then we just don't update it. And now we actually have to call the function. I guess we could call it down here. Actually, you know what I could do? I could completely just mitigate that bool and only call the function when the piece has moved. So the piece has already moved. Then we can do update moves. Piece has moved, update moves. Then we can do piece to move, update moves. Right. So, guess I could add this check. Otherwise, every time the pawn is moving, it's gonna pop the last element, which we don't want, because eventually the pawn won't be able to move at all. That's no good. So I guess we could try and run this now and see if it works. We got the pawn, he can move twice, we move once, and he can only move once. Perfect, perfect. That is exactly what we want. And now we obviously have to fix these guys. Let me actually just start with the bishop, because I think that's gonna be the most tricky one to update, since it's moving diagonally. And what I wanna do, I'm just gonna try something here. So let me just do this. Board size plus width, and then check current piece, and we want to get pieces, height, width, right, because this is a part of the class. So maybe I actually want to make this function in the game class instead of the chess piece class. And I will just pass in the chess piece, and then we can do piece.type, piece.moves.size, and then piece.moves.popback. And yeah, because moves is a private member variable, then I guess I will have to return a reference. We just want to call update moves here and do piece to move. So we got the moves, and since I will be accessing every move, I just want to do moves. Just name this moves and do piece.getMoves. And now I can replace these guys with moves. So we're getting the current piece that we're looking at. Add a little iterator for the moves. Then we want to check if it... So let me just change that to move and then change this to coordinate. We do move, begin. Coordinate is not move, end. And then increment the coordinate. Okay. Now we can check if the coordinate dot first is equal to current piece x, and coordinate second is current piece dot y, and I will explain this in a second. I will just print collision detected. Just do that. Collision detected, okay. That's because it should detect collision right there, and we can also print out collision detected at x coordinate first and y coordinate second, just to make sure we are getting collision where we assume it should be. So let's just look at this piece. So this should be 0, 64, 128, and the y should be 384. Okay, so we are getting collision where we want it, but I don't know about these guys, because 256 divided by 64, that's 4. That means we're going 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, but there's no piece here. Okay, guess we are going back to debugging. How many pawns am I looking through? What the hell? What? What the hell is that? Oh, I wonder if I'm adding the pieces in the middle of the board as well. You see, these guys are also pawns. There are a bunch of pawns here, which is obviously incorrect. There shouldn't be any pawns there. So that might be why I'm getting so many collisions, because there are these invisible pawns everywhere. So let me just fix that. Maybe I'm just gonna have to consider myself defeated and do the same thing as I did for the render and just create two separate for loops there. We're creating the tiles and then we're creating the chess pieces. There we go. Now we have no pieces in the middle, but these guys work just fine. Generate tiles, generate chess pieces. Now, if I'm not mistaken, we should get only 2 collisions if I manage to move to the same position as last. And if I can predict this, they should be at 128 for the X and this should be at 64 for the X. Yes, there we go. Look at that. Now we have only detected collision for those. Because here's what I'm thinking. For instance, when I move, let's say I move here, then if there's a piece here, I don't want to be able to move anywhere on this side, because I shouldn't be able to move behind the piece. And I don't want to remove the first collision either, because I want to be able to actually knock out a piece. I'm really going out on a limb here, so what I'm thinking here is when I detect collision, I want to remove every single move behind that piece and forward. So I'm getting the actual collision coordinate here, +1, so the one behind. And then I'm making sure the move is not at the end, because the coordinate is the move sequence iterator. So maybe I can just do, no, because the coordinate is the actual coordinate. I think I just figured it out. Maybe I can add some fucking lambda or something, I don't know. And of course this doesn't work at all. Alright, believe it or not, but I actually found it. I found the solution. I had to pass in a constant move sequence and then look through every move in the move sequence if this is true, and this is so messy, but it works. So I am looking diagonally, so let me just show you. So this piece is where the collision is, then I'm looking 64 to the left and 64 down, and then I keep going like that and looking if there is a collision there too, or if there is a coordinate. And I'm also adding some boundaries so that the actual coordinate from the move sequence is within 0 on the X and within 512 on the Y. And if all of those things are true, then it's going to return true. Otherwise, there's no move found. And then I remove it from the list just like that. And I think I have to restructure the way I'm adding the moves, because this doesn't seem right. Because I'll show you. When I run this, let's move him, because the moves have every single move, but the move sequence is like split up into separate fucking objects in the moves list. So if we now look at the actual move sequence, you see it only has one item. What I wanted to do is to have all of those to be one move sequence, but it works for now, so that's great. So now that I continue, you can see that that's gone and we can only move there. I guess we could also make a little check here. So when I have moved, I want to check if piece X, and I actually have to iterate through every piece again up here and check if piece.x, change this to current piece again. Then we want to print move collision. Let's see if that works. I get a move collision. Right, because I also want to check that the piece.type is not equal to current piece.type, and the piece.color is not equal to current piece.color. So if I'm not colliding with myself, because that shouldn't be possible. So now that I move, there is no move collision. Now if I move there, I get a move collision. That's perfect. So then I want to, what if I just make that into a new chess piece? Okay, there we go. So now it's gone. Now that's gone. Perfect. And I might want to add a destroy function for this too. Do SDL destroy texture, current piece, and then just reset that. That might work. Boop. It's gone. Boop. Now that's gone. Okay. That one disappears, but not the white one. What if I only do a check for the actual color? Okay. So, this is hella messy. I guess I could do this and then do that. Right now, I'm not sure what I'm planning. Yeah, it's very messy, but it works. Okay, so I have been doing some fixes off screen, guess you could say. So what I did was, instead of having the big switch case outside of all these functions, or all these for loops, I put the switch case inside. Because all of this logic, looking for the chess piece that's intersecting and removing a colliding chess piece from the board and all that, it all applies to all chess pieces. It's just when I'm removing the moves, that's where the distinction appears, I guess you could say. So I am done with the bishop for now. I might break these into separate functions, so removing all of the moves go into separate functions, so it doesn't get too messy in the switch case, because as you can see, if I zoom out a little bit here, this function is already super messy. Like it's 62 lines for this function only. And yeah, you can also see there's a bunch of nestling going on here. Like 2 for loops here, another 2 for loops, an if statement, a switch case, another for loop. Yeah, as you can see, the cognitive complexity is very big. So I'm definitely gonna clean this up later. But I wanna get it to work first and then work on the cleanup. I also wanna show you that I broke out the actual handling for the pawn. Because I didn't want to put this in a switch case, and the truth is it didn't really work. Since there's no collision, I just want to remove the second move after the first move. So let me just run this to show you that it works as expected. So I move there, and as you can see, it's all like I want it to be. So I can not move here anymore, I can only move there, and so forth. And then for the pawns, you can only move 2 steps in the beginning and then 1 step. But obviously I'm not close to done with this, so that's what I'll be focusing on now. So for the rook, I wanna do the same thing as this. So I'm gonna start by copying it in like that, but I wanna look for other types of move sequences. And if I'm not mistaken, I don't think I'm handling the right diagonal collisions. If I, for example, go out here, yeah, you can see you can still move behind this guy. So maybe I should fix that first. Let me change this to left diag, and then I'll make another lambda called right diag. Let me put the keyboard in the middle so it's easier to write. I'll do std find if. And actually, I wonder if I can replace this with a ranges. Should be able to just do that and do that. Yes. So let's just make sure it actually works. Yes, it does. Very good. Because ranges is slightly faster and it's less code. So I'll be sticking to that. Same container. I want to have the same coordinate. I'm passing the constant move sequence reference. And I wanna loop over all the coordinates in the move sequence. Now I wanna check if coordinate first, so that's the x plus entity size, equals c first, and coordinate second plus entity size, because we're still going down on the y-axis, equals c second. And then we just wanna check that the boundaries are okay. Then we wanna return true. Otherwise return false. And then I wanna do if right diag is not moves end. We wanna erase right diag. So I think that's fine. So we're moving out there. And we don't have any moves behind, just as expected. And at this point you might be wondering why I'm moving the black side first, because obviously in chess it's the white side starting first. That's gonna be fixed, so don't worry. I just want to get the basic functionality down first, and then I will implement more logic. Let me just pop a snooze and we will get right back into it. I guess I can also do this just to keep it a little neater. So let's work on the rook here. So that means that the x is gonna be plus, and then just make sure that the y is equal to the c. So we are checking if the x of the iterator plus 64, so the one to the right, is in the vector, and that the x is the same, and that the boundaries are obviously valid. Then we return true, otherwise false. I guess I could change this to right axis. So I suppose that's fine. Can always try. If we move the rook down there. Okay, it's checkered for some reason. So after a lot of thinking and trial and error, I have noticed that this is way too complex to even try to handle. So I'm gonna start by basically redoing the update moves and trying to break it out into separate functions from the actual beginning. But what I would like to do first is fix the move sequence, because as I showed earlier, it's not being handled correctly. So when I add a move, I'm making a new move sequence, pushing back that single move, and then adding that to all the moves, which is obviously incorrect. What I'm thinking of doing is making this even easier. So for the pawn, I want to create a move sequence here, like that. And then I would like to do a coordinate. I know I talked about for loops and how much I hate them because of complexity. But if I do break these out into functions eventually, then I think it's gonna be fine, because I already have for loops here and there, and yeah. Let's do int offset. Start with the entity size, because that's what we're gonna displace it with. Times 3, because we only want 2 of them. Then offset plus equals entity size. Now I just wanna do coordinate, new chord, and I wanna do these.x, these.y, plus, I think I can do just multiplier times offset. So this is gonna first take entity size, just like this one, create a new coordinate, and then the same thing for that, but this is times 2, which it already handles. And now I can just do move sequence, push back, new chord, and then I can just remove those, and I can just do piece add move sequence. So I'm gonna create a new function. And then I can also make this a constant reference, because we don't want to copy it since it's a vector. And then just do moves, push back, move sequence. So that seems to be fine. We can also just create a little breakpoint there. Just make sure everything builds. Step over, the new coordinate is a 0, 1, 28, and then we got the 0, 1, 92, and then it adds the move sequence, which now has 2 moves. So this is gonna be way easier than before. Earlier I had like one coordinate was for one move sequence. There was like a bunch of move sequences, and it was super hard to iterate through, which explains the frustration of not getting anywhere with the update moves function. So let's just do move sequence. I could also just do window width minus entity size. Might make it a little bit clearer. I think this is better because it explains that window width, that's way to the right, and then 1 back. I guess I could just do left sequence, right sequence, and then I guess I'll start by doing that. So the vertical sequence, go up and down. I'm not too sure about this right now. Do I want to handle it like this? I think what I'll do instead is just do a bool. I think that will work. Now I don't need these if statements in here. Could also make this vertical multiplier. I know this is so confusing. So what I'm initially doing here is I have this vertical multiplier, which is going to be positive or negative based on which side the moves should be on. So if the rook x is on 0, it means it's way to the left, so we should add moves to the right. And if it's the other way around, so if it's not on 0, it's to the right, then we're gonna add moves to the left of the rook. Times offset, and then we don't need that one. We're adding the vertical, yeah, this should not be vertical, this is horizontal. Guess I could just rename this to vertical multiplier to keep everything as clear as possible so I understand in the future. That looks like it's fine. And then I could also change one of these to horizontal sequences. So I want to do coordinate, new vertical chord. That's gonna be that. And then new horizontal coordinate. It's gonna be that. And then I want to do, and we are mixing up the names again, because this should be the vertical and this should be the horizontal. And then we can do horizontal sequence, push back new horizontal coordinate, and then vertical sequence, new vertical coordinate. And then I want to do piece, add move sequence. So if I'm not mistaken, that should be what we have to do. And I could also break this out to the top of the function just like that multiplier, because I'm using the vertical multiplier for the horizontal offsets. So I want to change these to horizontal multiplier, just like that. And maybe what I could do is, instead of having all these variables, I can add these straight to the pushback. And I can also do the same thing here, like that. So now we got the move sequences working. Guess I could just completely remove this add move function. Now I want to add the move sequences for the bishop. This is where the left diag and the right diag comes in place. Then I want to do left diag, push back. This should be the left diag. And then the right diag gets this one. Just like that. And then after the for loop, I want to do piece, add move sequence, left diag, and then the same with the right diag. And then the same for the king. Like that. And then the top should be this one, which means this should be the bottom, this should be the left, and this should be the right. And I also have to wrap these in curly braces because I can't create the variables otherwise. Just like that. Got a nice little pyramid going here. Very nice. And then the same thing for the queen, add diagonal moves. Actually, this is where I want to make a separate function. So I want to do add diagonal moves. I think that's fine. Let me just make sure I'm not working with any variables locked to the game class. I don't think so. So what I could do is just do piece, add diagonal moves, and then I can basically just take all of this, do that, and paste it in here. And then I have to remove these guys. Right, so we are not accessing this guy, but that's fine because I can just create that one like this. Replace this with piece, add diagonal moves. There we go. Saved a lot of code in this function. And then I don't need these curly braces for this guy because we're just calling a function. But for the left and the right moves, I want to... guess I could just add functions for those two. So add left moves. I was thinking of combining these into one function. Actually, I think I can do that. So I want to name this add horizontal. That's the right one. Because for the rook, I'm adding the horizontal and vertical moves. So I basically want to do the same thing. So what I can just do is do piece, add horizontal moves, and let's just make a function for the vertical moves too. And then we want the piece add vertical moves. Let's figure out what we have to do. Let's cut that away. Go to chessPiece.cpp, horizontal sequence. We want the vertical sequence down here. And then we're gonna want that, but only for the horizontal. Oh, we don't need this comment because we know it's only for the horizontal ones. So for now, I'm just gonna create these variables in the function, but I'm thinking of breaking these guys out to a member variable, so I don't have to create them for every single function here, because that's very unnecessary. So that looks fine, I think, because I don't know if I need the horizontal multiplier. That's the thing, because I wanna generate the moves both to the left and the right, and then just handle the like out of bounds in this function to automate it. So what I'm thinking of doing is just like that, so it adds to the left and to the right. And I guess I could do a little check here to see if x plus offset is greater or less than the window width. Then I want to add that. And then if x minus offset is greater than 0, or greater or equal to 0, we want to add those. And I'm thinking of making this the left sequence and the right sequence. So that's going to be the right sequence, the left sequence, then I'm going to add both of them. Wonder if that would work. Let's add the vertical ones. I think this is just the same. We're checking if the y plus offset is less than the window width, and if y minus offset is greater or equal to 0. And this is where I also want to add two of them, called bottom sequence. Oh, hold up. That's going to be the bottom sequence because it's going down, and then the top sequence. It's going to have the x and then the y minus offset. And then we gotta add the sequences. The funny thing is I'm not trying to run this between each change, so it's gonna be very interesting to see if this actually works. And for the queen, we want the horizontal moves and we want the vertical moves. Oh, really doesn't work. Ay. Okay, so I have now added some fixes. So what I needed to do was add these checks to the bishop as well, where I basically just check the boundaries like that. And then I also fixed the rendering because that was the issue with the moves not displaying. I just had to add that for loop for every coordinate in the move sequence and then render those out. So now, as you can see, it works just fine, almost. But I believe I have to fix a bit with the update moves, because he only has 2 moves there. So when I move, he's only gonna have 2 moves because I'm not updating the moves. But that shouldn't be too hard to do. Let me actually just make sure that the set moves works for every piece. The king, yes, and I'll have to fix that one, but that looks fine. The queen, you can move everywhere. That's great. And then the bishop, we already tried that. Then we got the knight. He should be able to move out like that. I think that's as expected. The rook, only up and down. Very good. And then I'll have to add those. So very nice. And then the pawn, I have to fix that as well. So that will be the next step, because I cleared the update moves. So let me just think this through for a little bit. What needs to be done? I need to first
check if there are any colliding pieces, and then I have to iterate and remove all moves beyond the colliding piece.
So that's the first step, and I'm gonna do my best to remove all the nestled for loops. As you can see, this is a complete fucking mess, and we don't want that. So let's get to work.